Chapter 1. The Captain. Fuel was essential. We hadn't yet acquired the ability to survive without it, and we needed it. And more importantly, we needed a way to transport it. Hence, the need for us to reclaim the 500-gallon fuel tanker we recently had to abandon. It wasn't a big tanker hauled by a semi. This type was small enough to be hooked up behind a pickup truck. It was perfect for us, and I assumed the captain thought the same. It was a muggy August morning by the time we got going. I sat in the back seat of the dually truck and looked at my two friends. Fred, the taciturn gunslinger, and Howard, a jovial father of two sons, were riding up front. Both of them were old enough to be my father, but I considered them close friends anyway. Fred took a surreptitious route back to where we had abandoned it the night before. Our plan was to park a safe distance away, sneak up to a suitable spot, and recon the site before any of us went in. We spotted a burned-out house on a side street approximately 300 yards away from our destination. "Looks like a good place," Fred said, and parked our zombie-proof truck behind the house. It seemed abandoned, and we assumed as much. I mean, why in the world would zombies be hanging out in a burned-out house? Alas, you know what they say about people who assume. "Look out, Howard!" I shouted as he stepped out of the truck. 4 of them, 2 adults and 2 kids, emerged from the charred remains and set upon him at once. Howard began running backwards while attempting to bring his rifle to bear. He ended up falling on his ass. The kids were going to reach him first. Howard froze in fear. Fred calmly stepped out of the truck, drew one of his pistols with lightning speed, and fired 4 times. The result was 4 zombies with an extra hole in their respective heads. Howard collected himself, stood shakily, and walked back to us. "Holy shit, Fred, you sure can shoot," Howard exclaimed as he caught his breath. I nodded in agreement. Fred was hell on wheels with his 6-shooters. I walked over and looked over the zombies. Even though they were horribly decomposed, the kids looked a lot like the adults. I pointed this out. "They look like a family," I said. "I think these 2 are the parents to these kids. They've stuck together all these months. And they were staying inside this house." I frowned. "Why in the hell were they hanging around inside this burned-out house?" "What do you mean, Zach?" Howard asked. "They've got to go somewhere, don't they?" "It seems odd, Howard. Look at them. Their clothing is not burned or charred, so they went inside the house after it had burned. It seems weird to me. I wonder if they lived here at one time. If they did, it means they remembered it somehow." Howard scratched the small amount of hair remaining on his head. "I think I see what you mean." He stared at the dead zombies for a minute, trying to figure it out in his mind. "How in the hell did they remember this was their house? And why have they stuck together?" "Yeah, you're right, Zach. It's weird. And it's totally over my head." I laughed. Fred, as usual, had no commentary on our observations. I guess he had other things on his mind at present. We cleared the house for good measure and then made our way through an overgrown field. "What do you think, Fred?" I asked. Fred pulled up the mosquito netting from around his face. The 2 girls, Julie and Macy, had taken boonie hats and sewn mosquito netting around them. We all wore them now. They kept all of the flying insects, which were horrendous this summer, out of our mouths, ears, and nose. Fred stretched. "Well, Zach, we have 3 possibilities. They found some lug nuts, put the wheels back on, and took it with them. They abandoned it. Or they've got an ambush set up and are waiting for us to mosey right into it." He was talking about the tanker we had abandoned the night before. It had several gallons of fuel in it, and we wanted it back. As I digested what Fred said, I resisted the urge to scratch the scar on the side of my head. It was healed now, nothing more than a linear scar above my ear, but it still itched constantly. "Let's work our way closer," I suggested. Fred and Howard nodded in agreement. We slowly worked our way through a sparse tree line until we got within 100 yards. As the tanker came into view, we saw a solitary man sitting beside it in a lounge chair. He appeared to be reading a book. A dusty black 4-wheel drive truck was parked nearby. 2 block letters were painted in red on the door. W.E. "I'd say it's the captain," Fred whispered. He handed the binoculars to Howard for confirmation. Howard took a short look and grunted. "Yep, that's him all right." He lowered the binoculars and looked at the 2 of us. "Are y'all going to kill him?" he asked. Fred shook his head. He and I had already discussed what to do if and when we encountered this man. Since Fred was leaving, we agreed it would be better if I tried to work something out with the man, even though we strongly suspected he was a nutcase. I looked at Howard. When you first told us about him, Fred and I talked about it at great length. If we kill him, it might eliminate the possible threat, or it may instigate his group to come after us. We're thinking it may be better to form some kind of truce with him. Besides, I'd kind of like to hear what he says, I said. I pointed toward the captain. How about I drive over there and introduce myself? Fred, you can take him out from here, I'm guessing. Fred nodded as he took the protective caps off of the lenses of his rifle scope. Howard, is it agreeable with you? I asked. I remembered how Howard literally shook when he told us of the meeting he had with the captain not so long ago. Howard shrugged. It's your funeral, Zach. I hope you know what you're doing. We worked out the usual plan. If I raised my hands, or if any aggressive move was made against me, Fred would open fire. I had a feeling of confidence because Fred did not miss when he shot a firearm. I walked back to the truck and drove to the waiting captain. He looked up from his book as I drove up. It was then I noticed a second chair beside him. He had been expecting this. I parked the truck and exited warily. Why, I'm guessing you are the young man who penned the note I found on this tanker. You are none other than the mighty Zach, are you not? He continued without waiting for my answer. You're much younger than I imagined. Please, sir, come join me. It is my honor to finally meet you. I walked up to him, all the while looking around with my peripheral vision. There was a teenage boy standing beside the truck. He was short, maybe 5'3", and slender. His arms were also very slender, but I could see some musculature. He had dyed black hair, which was cut short. Dark brown eyes accented with some black rubbed under them, and his face would have been feminine-looking if he wasn't trying so hard to look like the meanest man on Earth. He also had an assault rifle hanging from his shoulder in a sling. He and the captain were dressed almost exactly alike. Camouflage pants, black lace-up boots, wife-beater t-shirts, and tactical vests. Both had sidearms, and little dude's weapon looked like an M4 assault rifle. Very lethal. I only had a Kimber 45 secured in a holster on my side. I walked up to the big man and held out my hand. You must be the captain. I've heard of you. I'm Zachariah Gunderson. Call me Zach. He was as big as Howard had described him. Hell, his tattooed arms were almost as big around as my legs. He stood easily and extended his hand. His grip was like a vice, and I had to keep myself from wincing. He held it a moment longer than was necessary, smiled, and motioned toward the empty chair. Please join me, Mr. Gunderson, he said warmly. What was the gunfire I heard a few minutes ago? He asked. I nodded. A couple of zombies back there. Nothing to worry about, though. I got them in the head, and I'll burn them later. I repositioned the chair where I no longer had my back to the armed boy, and sat down. The captain sat a moment later as if he had not noticed. The boy remained beside the truck, glaring at me. So, Zach. Zach the zombie killer. We meet at last. He made a casual sweeping motion with one of those big arms. When journeying around this area, I have been seeing signs, a pattern of behavior of which I've not seen anywhere else. Your rules, the FEMA signs painted on houses, the gas caps on vacant automobiles. Oh, and let's not forget the dead, headshots and burned afterward. He held up a finger and waggled it slightly. It looked like an oversized Vienna sausage. When I observed these things, I knew there was somebody operating out here with an intelligent, orderly mind. He stared at me a moment longer, then reached for the book he was reading and held it up with a challenging smile. Have you ever read any poetry by Rudyard Kipling? I've read a few of his works, I said. Oh? Which is your favorite, might I ask? I can tell the cut of a man by his favorite poetry. In truth, I had read them all. As a young boy, I found Kipling fascinating, but I did not say as much. The first one I ever read was The Thousandth Man. I like most of what he's written, but the first one has always stuck with me. He smiled again. The Thousandth Man, you say? Ah, yes, a very good poem. A poem of unwavering loyalty. He slowly nodded his head as he stared at me. Yes, I can see it in you. He motioned at the book. I just finished reading Young British Soldier when you appeared. I have my own variation of a part of it. He looked out into an imaginary audience and began his soliloquy. When you're wounded and left on the Tennessee plains, and the zombies come out to eat up your remains, just roll to your rifle and blow out your brains, and go to your God like a soldier. He finished with a triumphant pointing at the sky and looked at me questioningly. I must admit, I like it. Kipling is probably rolling over in his grave, though. The captain smiled, pleased at the compliment. How did you survive the apocalypse? I had a friend and mentor who foresaw this event and planned accordingly. I suppose you could say he would be a 1,000th man. The captain arched an eyebrow. Oh, I would like to meet a man of this caliber. I'm sorry to say he is now only with me in spirit, I said without any outward emotion. Ah, sad. Very sad. I hope he went to his God like a soldier, he said somberly. I did not respond. Rick died in his sleep. Whether or not he died like a soldier could be debated. It was not something I cared to discuss. And yet you have survived, the captain said. I gave a slight shrug. I can only guess I'm somewhat immune to the plague, as I would guess you and others are as well. Would I get infected if I were bitten? I shrugged. Probably. How did you survive? I asked. A group of us have a compound near Eagleville. When we saw the signs, we gathered together, put up barricades, and waited it out. You look like you have some Viking heritage. Gunderson. That's a Nordic surname, is it not? He asked. I nodded. My father's family is from Sweden. My mom was of British ancestry. Ah. He looked at me a moment before continuing. What is your opinion of this so-called plague? I thought it over before responding. It started with people displaying typical flu-like symptoms, fever, jaundice, and ague. A degradation of physical acuity followed, and then they would become extremely violent. The virus, along with the fever, affected the brain somehow. I'd guess the hypothalamus was greatly affected. The infected seemed to have diminished cognitive functions, but their extreme aggression and acute gross motor skills seemed to indicate a high level of adrenaline being pumped into the body. I took a breath. From the onset of the infection, the body tissue is breaking down and decomposing. It's my opinion that they will eventually die out. The captain gazed at me intently during my diatribe. Die out, you say? Interesting. He pointed at me suddenly. You should join my group, Zach. You'd fit right in. I grunted. I'm getting the impression you and your group do not welcome anyone other than Caucasians. The captain shook his head slowly. No, Zach, we don't. Now, don't get me wrong. I have no personal hatred of niggers, kikes, slopes, spics, ragheads, fags, or any other minority. But they don't belong with our group. Nor do they have any place in my plans of rebuilding this world. I shook my head slowly. We're going to have to disagree then, Captain. In my world, using a disparaging term to label a group of people is just plain wrong. I pointed at his book. I believe Kipling agrees with the sentiment. The captain scoffed and waved the book around before tossing it in the weeds. Now, Zach, it is nothing but poetry after all. I would assert to you your rules are far more worthy in today's world than most poetry. He paused in reflection for a moment and looked back at the tanker. Someone had apparently tried to tow it off. All of the wheels had fallen off and it was now sitting on the ground. I believe I have something valuable to add to your list of rules, he said. What number are you up to now? 10, I said. I had many more in my head and written in my notes, but I had not posted them as of yet. He held up a finger. A zombie rule. Zombies have no need for logistics. On the face of it, it's a very simplistic sentence, but like your rules, there is a deep meaning within. Think about it, Zach. Those things don't require food or water like regular humans. They don't need warmth on a cold night. They don't need sanitary conditions. They don't need medication or sleep. Hell, they probably don't need air to breathe. He pointed at the tanker. They most certainly don't need fuel. I looked at the tanker, wondering how I was going to get it back from him if he didn't want to give it back. It's a good rule, I said. We sat in silence for a long minute. I was wary of the captain. He was being downright cordial, but I suspected it was a facade. Plus, I was fully aware the chair he had waiting for me was strategically placed so his boy would be behind me. All I wanted at this point was to get the tanker and be gone. "Zach, what are your plans?" he asked. I looked at him questioningly. "Your plans, Zach? What are your plans for the future?" "Well, Captain, I'm all for rebuilding a productive society. I would like to hope we can avoid the mistakes of past generations. There's no need for pettiness, racial strife, or domination of one group over another. The people who have survived this apocalypse have far more important things to worry about." The captain clapped his hands once in mock glee. "Spoken like a true idealist." He stood and stretched. "It'll never happen, Zach. People are people, after all. They covet. They harbor grudges and ill will, sometimes for several years. Their petty egos and jealousies will never allow them to be satisfied with the social utopia you envision. I'm thinking you are an avid reader, Zach. Have you forgotten all of the history books you've read?" The captain laughed without mirth. "Haha, Mr. Gunderson. Your naivete is somewhat refreshing, but oh so misguided." I thought about what the captain was saying. I thought of Leon. I thought of Jason and his boys, men who had behaved exactly how the captain had said. They coveted what I had, and even tried to kill me for it. "You have a valid argument, but I'm not looking for conquest. I only want a peaceful life." "What do you think, Andy?" he asked the boy. "I think he's an idiot," the boy standing beside the truck opined. The captain looked at me as if I had been challenged. I shrugged my shoulders dismissively. However, there was something in the boy's voice. I looked at him and was met with a defiant glare. He gestured toward the tanker. "That was very clever, Zach. We had no idea the lug nuts were missing until we tried to drive off with it. Is there any reason why I should give it back to you?" the captain asked. He was smiling pleasantly, but there was a cold look in his eyes. "Before I answer you, Captain, please allow me to ask a couple of questions." He waved a hand. "How's your fuel supply?" The captain shrugged non-committally. "It could be better." "Do you have any tankers like this one?" I asked. "We have one." He paused a moment. "We also have a storage tank back at the compound. Why do you ask?" "Bring that tanker to me, and I'll get it filled up with gasoline." The captain's eyes now peaked with curiosity. "Did you hear him, Andy? Zach here seems to know where a supply of fuel is." "Bullshit," Andy said. "So call my bluff then. What do you have to lose?" I challenged. The captain laughed. "Oh, I like you, Zach. I've not been amused in quite a while now. But you must tell me, where is this cache of gasoline? Do you have it at your own compound?" I shook my head. "Nope. It's in a fuel reservoir in downtown Nashville on the east bank of the river, near the old Titans football stadium, to be specific." The captain stared at me in amazement a moment, and then laughed uproariously. "Zach, it's impossible. There are thousands of zombies in the downtown area. I've seen it myself. I sent in a team a few months ago, and they were surrounded within minutes. They didn't make it, Zach. They were annihilated." I held my hands out, careful not to raise them. "I have a plan. It might even go better if you want to help out." He looked at me, unbelieving at first, and then with concern. "Do you have a cadre of soldiers, Zach?" he asked quietly. I did not answer directly. "I'm gonna try it out with a small group. If everything goes according to plan, we'll gain access to the fuel. There are a lot of variables, and to be honest, it might not work. But I think we should try. I could use a few people with rifles." "What do you think, Andy?" he asked. "I think he's full of shit. He'll probably get eaten or blow himself up," Andy replied. "Did you hear that? My niece thinks you're full of shit." I glanced over at her quickly. Haha, so that explained it. He was in fact a she. I could see the feminine features now. She was very much a tomboy, but yes, definitely a she. The captain sat back down and pulled his chair closer. He leaned forward and placed his big, meaty hands on his knees. "All right, Mr. Gunderson. You've got my attention. Tell me your plan." Chapter 2. A Matter of Trust. "Don't tell me you trust him," Howard asked. We were standing around near the burned-out house. I told him about the conversation between the captain and me as Howard gathered some dead wood and debris. I shrugged. "Short answer, no." Once I proposed my plan to the captain, he agreed to assist in the endeavor. He even helped me reattach the wheels to the tanker and shook my hand before driving off. I waited for 5 minutes before I drove away. Fred had been inspecting the tanker for any signs of sabotage. "I have to go along with Howard on this one, Zach. He can't be trusted." I nodded. "I agree, Fred, but in spite of the trust factor, I think we can pull it off. We're gonna need the extra firepower if we have any hope of getting into downtown Nashville. Besides, this will give us an opportunity to learn who and what we're up against." Howard chewed on his lip a moment. "You might have a point, Zach. Know your enemy. That's what one of them war generals said, right?" I smiled and nodded. "You're thinking if the racist bastard sees we're an asset, he won't try to kill us, like when I fixed his bus. Is that what you're thinking?" I nodded again. "He has a grand scheme of rebuilding the world. He'll view us as nothing more than minions, but it should be enough for him to not try any nonsense." "So he wants to rebuild the world, with him being the king of this new society, of course. He has grandiose delusions," Fred said. He stacked the corpses together and Howard began stacking the kindling. Soaking it with some of our newly acquired fuel, he lit it carefully. I nodded. "Yeah, I suppose. The point is, he claims he wants to rebuild, not go around killing everyone. He may be Machiavellian, but we can work with it, at least for a little while. What do you think, guys?" I asked, as we got the bodies burning sufficiently. Both men thought about it as we got in the truck and started toward home. Fred pointed at the two of us as he drove. "You two decide, and I'll help out however I can. I'm leaving soon, and I don't know if I'll even make it back. So I don't believe I should have a vote on the matter." I looked at Howard, who shrugged noncommittally. "We need fuel, that's a fact." He rubbed his face. "I don't trust him. He's not right in the head, I'm thinking. But I'll go along with it if you think it'll benefit us, Zach." We ultimately agreed. We drove back to my farm with Howard chit-chatting about the weather. Fred was his usual quiet self. "It won't be long now," I finally said. Howard glanced at me. I had brought up the subject none of us wanted to discuss. "Yep," Fred responded. "I figure the day after we get the gas, I'll head out." He looked over from the driver's seat. "You two have been a tremendous help. Zach, you've thought of stuff I never would have dreamed of. Howard, you've got that truck in tip-top shape. I actually think I'm going to be able to make it thanks to you two." We were getting close to the turnoff to the driveway. He suddenly stopped the truck in the middle of the road. I thought maybe he saw some zombies or something and looked around hastily. Seeing no threat, I looked at Fred. He was staring straight ahead. "Give me a year. If I'm not back by then and you haven't heard from me, you'll know I'm dead. You'll know what to do." He was quiet then and then proceeded up the driveway without waiting for a response. I looked at him a moment and then stared out of the window. I wanted to say something, anything that sounded reassuring, but came up empty. We had planned, prepared, rehearsed, all in secrecy. Fred did not want the girls to know what he was going to do until the day he was leaving. I guess he hated long goodbyes. I watched him as he readjusted the guns on his hips. "If you're going to keep carrying your pistols, you might want to wear a set of shoulder holsters. Those holsters you're wearing now aren't meant to be worn by someone sitting in a car seat for hours at a time." Fred nodded. "I believe I have one sitting on the shelf of my closet. Good idea." I couldn't think of anything else. I stepped out and unlocked our recently installed gate. Fred drove through. We were at the house a few minutes later. Howard?" I asked as we got out of the truck. "Yeah, buddy." Howard looked at me as he stretched and wiped the sweat off of his brow. "Our garden is doing pretty good. In fact, we have some extra stuff. Now, please don't be offended, but we grew a lot of watermelons, and I was wondering if you wanted any." Howard looked at me with a serious expression. "Why, sure, as long as you don't tell the white folks." He then laughed uproariously. Even Fred cracked a smile. We walked over to the garden and I pointed them out. "Dang, Zach, those melons are big," Howard said as he rubbed his belly. "Thank Bernie's bees. According to him, melons are dependent on bees for pollination. Oh, and the ample supply of cow manure is a good source of fertilizer." "Well, they sure look good. How many can I have?" he asked. I shrugged. "Help yourself. Hell, let's eat one now." We grabbed one and went to the front porch. Fred pulled out his Bowie knife and cut up a bunch of slices. We dug in, and within seconds we had juice running down our chins as we ate. The girls walked outside and gaped at us. "Look at you three slobs," Julie lamented. "I'll get some napkins." She ducked back inside the house. Fred cut Macy a slice and handed it to her as Julie came back outside with a handful of cloth napkins. "Dig in," he said. "The baby will love it." Macy smiled, sat on the steps, and took a bite. She spit out a seed a moment later. It landed at her feet. Howard got up from his chair and sat beside her. "Girl, you gots to learn how to properly spit out a watermelon seed. Watch the master." He took a bite, chewed a moment, and then spit a seed across the yard. Macy took another bite and mimicked his actions. The seed flew in an arc and landed a foot away from Howard's seed. He gave a deep belly laugh. "There you go. You're now an expert seed spitter." Macy smiled as she and Howard took turns spitting. Fred and I watched quietly while the three of them laughed in glee. "I want to spit too," Julie said laughingly. Fred already had a slice cut and handed it to her. She sat beside Macy, and the three of them took turns spitting seeds. Fred looked over at me and smiled sadly. I knew what he was thinking. He was downcast about leaving. After a few minutes of their antics, Howard stood. "I've got to be getting home, or else LaShonda will jump all in my ass. Thanks for the watermelons," Howard said. We helped carry the watermelons to his Hummer and bid our goodbyes. "I need to get home as well. I'll see all of you tomorrow," Fred said. He started to walk toward his truck. He stopped suddenly and turned around. He walked back to the girls and took turns hugging them. He looked at Macy. "I think you're going to make a wonderful mother," he said before getting into his truck and leaving. Her cheeks turned a rosy red as she muttered thanks. The three of us ate a dinner of chicken with a mixture of canned vegetables. Our salt and pepper was running low, so we used it sparingly. "I'm trying to get my head wrapped around your plan," Julie said. Dabbing at my face with my napkin, I attempted to explain. "First, we'll recon the objective. If the plan is feasible, I'll call in fire support. That will be the captain's duty. He'll come rolling in with his bus, firing his machine guns, killing every zombie in sight. The trucks with the tankers will be following the bus. We bring them into the fuel reservoir, fill them up, and then follow the bus back to the rendezvous point," I said. "And you trust him?" Macy asked. "Up to a point," I answered. "Zach, what's stopping him from pointing those machine guns at you and taking the gas? Maybe even killing you to boot?" Julie asked. "I'm working out the details, but I think I have a way of avoiding that," I said. I finished my food and retrieved my notepad. "I'm all ears," Julie said. Macy snorted. I smiled. "It involves you and employing your sniper skills." I turned to the page where I had a hand-drawn map of the intersection of Old Hickory Boulevard and Nolensville Pike. The girls peered closer while I explained. Chapter 3. Operation Gas. The evening sky was hazy, overcast, and there were inky, ominous clouds creeping up from the south. I saw the faint glimmer of lightning and stopped the truck. I had been waiting for 3 days since the meeting with the captain for optimal weather conditions for what we were going to attempt, and I believed it was finally here. Howard Jr., or Lil H as we called him, looked at me when I stopped the truck. Seeing no zombies, we got out. We were on a bridge on Nolensville Pike. Mill Creek flowed under. I saw lightning again in the distance. "Listen, Lil H." I started counting off the seconds out loud. I got to the count of 7 before hearing the rumble of thunder. 7 seconds. The storm is about 7 miles away. We're going to wait a minute or two and then do the same thing over again. Do you know why? Lil H scrunched up his face in deep thought and then shook his head. We're going to determine if the storm is moving toward us. Another flash of lightning illuminated the horizon. Start counting. Lil H counted out loud as I had done. We heard the rumble of thunder when he got to 5. "It's getting closer," he said. "How do you know?" I challenged. "Because light travels faster than sound, and when the time between the lightning and thunder gets shorter, it's because it's moving closer," he said. I smiled and nodded. "All right, let's check the level of the creek." The two of us got out of the truck and walked over to the edge of the bridge. "What are you looking for?" he asked. I pointed at the water. I'm looking at the water level of the creek, I pointed. Do you see the marks on the bridge abutment? Yeah, Lil H responded. I looked at those marks yesterday. The creek is up by about a foot, and it's going to keep rising, which is good for us. I put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed. It's going to be raining soon. Time to put our plan into action. Lil H looked up at me and grinned. All right. We got back into the truck and drove to the Allens' home, a former tire shop located at the intersection of Nolansville Pike and Old Hickory Boulevard. Howard and LaShonda listened as I got in touch with Fred on the shortwave radio. He answered after a few attempts. Rain is heading our way. Operation Gas is a go. I'll bring the boats and tell the others. ETA is 1 hour. He signed off. I rotated the dial on the radio until I found another frequency. Come in, Captain. This is Zach, I said into the microphone. Go for the captain, a voice responded after a minute. It sounded familiar. Andy, is that you? I asked. 10-4, what do you want, Zach? Her tone was curt. Operation Gas is a go. If you guys are still in, be here in 2 hours. I'll relay the information. Stand by. I sat by the radio and waited. Mrs. Allen came in with a cup of coffee and a half a loaf of hard bread. I nodded gratefully, tore off a piece and dunked it in my coffee. It was then I realized Mrs. Allen was standing over me looking very worried. I'd like to hear what you're planning again, why you need little Howard so badly, she asked. I put the soggy bread down on the saucer. I had gone over it with everyone more than once, but she was understandably worried. Okay, it goes like this. It's a 2-person operation. Lil H and I are going to camouflage ourselves and use John boats to traverse down Mill Creek. Mill Creek meanders its way through the South Nashville area and eventually dumps into the Cumberland River. We're going to plant noisemakers at various points along the riverbanks and wait. When the noisemakers attract the zombies away from the reservoirs, the others will move in and will fill up our tankers. If we're successful, we'll have enough fuel to last through the winter. I finished my bread and drank some coffee. What if there are too many zombies? What will you do then? She asked. I'll get on the radio and tell everyone to abort. Then we simply reverse course. We'll be home in a few hours. She stared at me pointedly. Why do you need my son? It's a 2-man job. He can swim and he's small. The boats are going to be full of stuff. We're going to need all of the room we can get. We had found several old-style boomboxes at a pawn shop. Batteries were much harder to find, unfortunately, so I had rigged them to run off of car batteries. The advantage was they were going to play loudly for several hours. When the zombies have moved away, Fred and Howard will come in with their truck and tanker, along with one of the captain's men in their truck. LaShonda shook her head with worry. If my son comes to harm, I'll never forgive you, Zachariah Gunderson, she said. I believe the weather combined with dusk will greatly diminish their ability to see. I started to say more, but she walked out of the room without another word. I watched her walk out as Andy came over the radio. Are you there, Zach? She asked. Affirmative, I responded. We'll be there. If anything changes, let me know. I'll be monitoring this frequency. I acknowledged and signed off. The rain was starting when we arrived at the creek with the boats and equipment. Fred helped me launch the boats and tether them together. Lil H and I put life preservers on and got in. Okay, Lil H, we got oars and a trolling motor. If you see zombies, hide under those blankets. I'll shoot them if I have to. How long will it take, Zach? He asked. The rain was falling harder now and the lightning strikes were closer. A few hours, I think. I hoped. Fred and Howard waved at us as we floated off. Mill Creek was rising with water quickly now as the rain steadily intensified. Our boats sped along with the current, occasionally using our oars to push us away from the banks. As we passed through the different neighborhoods, all we saw were rotting corpses. Many of them were now mere skeletal remains, with some last remaining vestiges of tissue holding the bones together. We passed by one who was stuck in the mud. He turned his head on a rotting neck as we went by it. There wasn't a living human in sight. There were other life forms, though. Flies, mosquitoes, mice, and rats, to name a few. Millions of them. Without mankind to control their population, they thrived. As we went under the Murfreesboro Road Bridge, there were a few corpses on the side of the creek bank. Suddenly, Lil H gasped. "Those are moving, Zach," he whispered. I peered closer, and when I realized what I was seeing, almost vomited. No, H. They're not alive, I whispered. The writhing movements of the thousands of maggots made the bodies seem alive, though. I explained it to him. He gagged involuntarily, but to his credit, he held it down and didn't complain. It looked like they had been living in a hobo camp under the bridge before dying of some unknown cause. I casually wondered what had led to their demise. Was it zombies? Disease? There were no other surprises as the creek threaded its way through the Donaldson community, and soon we were dumped out into the Cumberland River. Exiting the tributary, we now had to travel upstream. This was going to be a test. If the Cheatham Dam was compromised, the current was probably going to be too strong for a trolling motor, but I did not feel a loud outboard motor was worth the risk. I threw a small chunk of wood out into the river and the two of us watched it. "What do you think, Zach?" Lil H asked. "The current doesn't seem to be any stronger than normal. Full speed ahead," I said as I looked back at him. He had practically begged me to let him steer the trolling motor, and I relented with a chuckle. The look on his face indicated he was thoroughly enjoying our little adventure. It was dusk now. We placed our first noisemaker on the bank 100 yards from the creek. We continued this every 100 yards or so, including a few I had rigged so they would float in the water. Along with trash, logs, and other unknown types of debris, we saw several corpses in the river. They were unmoving and appeared lifeless. We proceeded unmolested. It wasn't until we reached the east bank where we wanted to land when we encountered them. There were approximately a dozen standing around right where we wanted to land. "All right, H, it's time to see how good of a sailor you are. Keep us in one place while I shoot those bastards." Lil H nodded, pointed the boat upstream, and manipulated the throttle expertly. I used my Ruger 22 with a homemade silencer attached. I only missed once. The small caliber bullets did not make much of an overt impact. The only indicator was a small hollow hole suddenly appearing in their foreheads, and then they would slowly fall over. Truthfully, I was surprised there were any mobile zombies left alive. Finding no others nearby, I glanced at my watch. It read a little past 1800 hours. We were proceeding on schedule. "Okay, buddy, it's time for the signal," I said. Little Howard grinned in a way only a kid could grin. It made me wonder at what age you lost it, and when I had lost mine. He reached down in the boat and retrieved a plastic baggie with a walkie-talkie sealed inside. Fred and Howard waited in the security of the dually pickup truck, parked in the middle of the Nolansville Pike intersection of Old Hickory Boulevard. The rain was coming down now in torrents. The sky was inky black and only lit up when there was a lightning strike. "So, you're really going to do it?" Howard asked. It was not the first time he had asked the question. "Yep," Fred answered, which was the same answer he gave on the 3 previous occasions he was asked. "California and back," Howard said, which was probably the 3rd or 4th time he had pointed out the obvious. "That's one hell of a trip, even when the world was normal. You say Zach has a route all planned out?" "Yep," Howard grunted. "Zach's a smart kid, isn't he?" Fred glanced over at Howard and realized he was the type who talked a lot when he was anxious. "He's smart, capable, and resourceful. Little Howard is safe with him," he said. "Yeah," Howard said quietly. "I'm just worried is all." Howard took a deep breath. "If it was one of my kids in Los Angeles, I want to go and get him, but damned if I know I'd be up to it. I'd be scared to death, Fred." Fred didn't answer. The radio came to life. "Come in, Zach." It was a distinctive voice with a southern twang. "That's the captain," Howard said. Fred picked up the microphone. "We're at the staging point. Zach hasn't signaled yet. Where are you?" "Who is this?" the captain asked in the tone of a demand. Fred looked at the microphone for a second and then looked at Howard. "This is Fred. Are you close or not?" Fred asked. There was a moment's pause. "We'll be there shortly. The rain is slowing us down." Howard chuckled. A short time elapsed, and then there was a large glow moving down the street. As it got closer, they recognized the bus. "They've put a rack of lights on the top of that contraption since the last time I've seen it," Howard said. "They sure are bright." The bus was followed by a black pickup truck hauling a tanker. Fred counted 4 men in the bus, the captain and a tomboy-looking girl driving the truck. The 2 men got out of the truck. Howard got out as well, walked halfway, and waited for the captain. Fred lingered back, ready to shoot if things went bad. "Hello, Captain," Howard said and stuck his hand out. The captain eyed him as if he was looking at a stain on his shirt. After a moment, his expression quickly changed to jovialness and shook Howard's hand. "I remember you. You're the mechanic. So, you're in cahoots with Zach, huh?" the captain said as he eyed Fred. "Who's your friend?" Howard remained cordial. "That is Fred McCoy. We're all with Zach." "Well now, your group seems to keep growing. How many of you are there?" the captain probed. "Thousands," Fred responded dryly. The captain looked at him balefully and then chuckled. "All right, you two. Have any of the plans changed?" he asked. "Nope," Fred answered. "Our only problem that we know of is the choke point at the Thompson Lane intersection. There's a bunch of abandoned cars stacked together, but there's a gap approximately 10 feet wide. Zach and I reconnoitered the area yesterday. There's minimal zombie traffic on this side of Thompson Lane. Once you proceed further into downtown, the numbers increase." "And you think we can drive straight down Nolensville Pike into downtown Nashville, killing zombies as we go, hang a right, cross the bridge over the river, and drive right up to those fuel reservoirs?" the captain asked. "That's the plan," Fred said. The captain looked over at the man accompanying him. Fred sized him up. He was in his 20s, just under 6 feet tall, lean and wiry. He had a high and tight haircut and kept his shoulders square. He had the look of a man with military training. Fred noticed they all dressed alike, camouflage cargo pants, black boots, and black tank tops. The radio crackled to life. "Come in, Daddy." "That's my son," Howard said. He hurried over to the truck and grabbed the microphone. "What's up, little buddy?" "Zach and I are here. He says it's clear to come in," Lil H said excitedly. Howard chuckled. "He sounds like he's having the time of his life. Okay, gentlemen, they're at the reservoir and it's clear. Are we ready to go?" "Most certainly," the captain said. He went back to the bus. Fred looked at his watch and glanced over at Andy standing by her truck. When the bus driver turned on the lights, he got a good look at her. Her right eye was black and swollen shut. Andy saw him looking. "What are you looking at?" she challenged. "I can't imagine the captain allowing anyone to hit his own niece. Unless, of course, he was the one doing the hitting," Fred said quietly. Andy did not respond directly. "Are we ready to go?" she asked. Fred nodded. One of the buildings had an overhang which kept most of the pelting rain out. I had an idea and grabbed a can of spray paint. I was now abbreviating somewhat. Instead of painting out Rule 1, I now simply used Z1. Painting them quickly, I added 2 more rules to the original 10. Z11, they don't require logistics. Z12, they're capable of retaining some memories. After I finished, we quietly unloaded the tools out of the second boat, attached a grounding rod, and got to work. It was a little nerve-wracking. I only had a vague idea of how to bypass the safety controls. The lightning strikes were getting very close, and let's not ignore the fact we were in downtown Nashville, where literally thousands of zombies were probably still alive and lurking about. "Zach, do you have any books I can read?" he asked quietly as he watched me work. I chuckled. "I have lots of books. First chance I get, I'll get you some good ones to get started on. I'll even work up some lesson plans if you're willing." Lil H nodded his head eagerly. The bus moved quickly and Howard struggled to keep up. Fred spoke into the microphone. "Captain, we're having a hard time keeping up with these tankers in tow." There was a garbled response, but they finally slowed a little. On the first zombie they saw, the 2 gunners must have put a dozen rounds each into it. Howard glanced over at Fred and chuckled. The shooting intensified as they neared the inner city. One of the gunners displayed some common sense and was making disciplined short bursts to the heads of the unwitting zombies. Fred looked back. Andy was following 2 car lengths behind with their headlights off. When they started over the bridge, the vehicles had to slow. There were corpses piled up, a few abandoned cars, and a multitude of infected. Even Fred started shooting now. He marveled at the obliviousness of the zombies as their companions dropped beside them. I started talking about my favorite books, but I was stopped by the sound of distant automatic weapons fire. "Here they come," I whispered. I worked quicker now. I wanted to have gas ready to flow as soon as the tankers arrived. Lil H nudged me and pointed. I saw the bright lights on top of the bus as they slowly made their way across the bridge, firing at anything moving. The 2 trucks were following closely behind. You hear it, H? They're shooting the shit out of anything and everything. He nodded silently. The convoy steadily advanced and eventually made their way into the entrance. I aimed a flashlight toward them and blinked it several times. The bus parked at the entrance and the 2 trucks made their way toward Little H and me. "Any problems?" Howard asked when they got out. He walked over to his son and instinctively put an arm around him. Andy exited her truck and followed. "So far, it's been smooth as silk." I cupped my flashlight, giving us just enough glow so we could see each other. The first thing I noticed was she wasn't wearing a bra. The rain was causing her tank top to cling to her skin and her nipples were poking out. I quickly looked up and spotted the black eye. "What happened?" I asked. She glared at me before responding. "What the fuck is it to you?" she retorted. I shrugged. "Okay, forgive me for caring." I changed the subject. "Fred, can I get you and Lil H to stand guard?" He nodded. "Howard, drive the truck to that set of pipes down at the end, and Andy, follow Howard. Don't light any cigarettes." I was interrupted by Andy. "Let's get this over with unless you want to stand around jerking off all night," she said. Now it was my turn. Her attitude was pissing me off. "Get something straight right now. We do this my way. You do exactly what I say without your ridiculous remarks or get the fuck out of here. I'm done trying to be cordial with you. This is a dangerous operation we're about to attempt, and I'm betting you have no fucking idea what to do," I declared. She attempted to maintain her one-eyed glare, couldn't do it, and acquiesced. "Fine," she finally said. "Good." I went over my instructions again. When I was finished, Howard got to work. The loading platform of the fuel reservoir was designed to fill tanker trucks equipped with bottom-loading apparatus. Designed for safety, there were a few of the processes and safety protocols in which we were going to need to bypass. After a long 45 minutes, we managed to get fuel coming out of the pipeline and filled both tankers without blowing ourselves up. I kept eyeing my watch, but we were actually ahead of schedule. It took another hour to fill the tankers. I gave the signal and Howard shut the valve off. "All right, Zach. I think I'm going to leave everything exactly how it is so it won't take so long next time." I nodded in agreement as Andy watched quietly. I looked around and saw something I missed. "We're done here. Almost." She looked at me questioningly. I retrieved the can of spray paint and added my initial at the bottom of the rules before tossing the can back into the truck. "Well, now we're finished." She smiled before she could help herself. "Are we ready to head out?" she asked. She had slung her rifle and was holding her arms around her. The rain had cooled things down somewhat of what would otherwise be a hot August night. "Yeah, we're going to load up the John boats and we'll be right behind you. I've got a windbreaker in the truck. Do you want to borrow it?" She quickly shook her head. "Okay, if you change your mind, let me know. We'll be ready in a minute." She stared at me for what seemed longer than necessary, and then jogged to her truck. "All right, Howard, let's get loaded up and get out of here." We stacked the 2 boats on top of each other in the bed of the truck and lashed them down. Then I gave a low whistle. Fred and Lil H jogged up and got in the truck with us. "Look what I found," Lil H exclaimed. He held up a black backpack. "What's in it?" I asked as Howard drove back over the bridge. We opened it up and looked inside. There was a couple of boxes of bullets, toiletries, some canned food, and a spiral notebook. I thumbed through the notebook. It appeared to be a personal journal. I put it back in the pack. I'd read it later. "How'd it go with the captain?" I asked. "A little tense, but otherwise okay," Howard said. Howard offhandedly pointed in the distance. "Lots of zombies still out there, Zach. We passed a lot of rotting corpses along the way, maybe thousands of them, but the captain and his crew still killed quite a few." I nodded. I was certain they would have all been dead by now. Fred offhandedly pointed at the bus. "He had 2 men firing those M60 machine guns. One of them had good fire discipline. He shot in tight, short bursts, definitely ex-military. The other one was reckless, probably shot 3 times the amount of ammo. I believe the captain drove. Oh, and there were a couple of them crouched down in the bus. I just happened to catch a glimpse of them, but they didn't do any shooting. Kind of odd, if you ask me. Like they didn't want us to know they were there." "Are we still planning on standing them up at the rendezvous?" Howard asked. "Damn right," Fred responded. "The man can't be trusted. I wouldn't put it past him to take our tanker at gunpoint and maybe shoot 1 or 2 of us just to show us who the boss is." Howard nodded vigorously, and I had to agree as well. I reached for the microphone. "Come in, Captain," I said. "Why, Zach, is that you?" he responded. "Yes, sir. The op was successful. Both tankers have been filled. How is it on your end?" "We're having a good old time here. I believe we terminated over 500 of them," he said. "Roger that, sir," I said as I looked at Fred knowingly. "Those boys of his must have fired over 1,000 rounds each," he said. "We were hoping they would expend as much ammunition as possible." The captain's voice came over the radio again. "Come in, Andy," he said. "I'm here," she responded. I peered through the heavy rain and saw the outline of her truck a couple of 100 yards ahead of us. It looked like she had stopped in the middle of the street and was waiting on us to catch up. "Are you good?" the captain asked her. "Yeah, we're more than good," she responded. I wondered if there was any code speak going on. The original plan involved meeting up with the captain back at Nolansville and Old Hickory Boulevard. The captain wanted to run a debriefing, and then we'd shake hands or something and go our separate ways. The three of us thought this might be an opportunity for the captain and his crew to take us out, or at the very least, steal our fuel. We wanted no part of it and came up with our own plan. We followed at the tail end of the caravan. When we approached the barricade at Thompson Lane, Howard stopped the truck and I quickly exited. Howard looked out through the mesh of hardware cloth covering the window. "I sure hope he don't get pissed and do something to you." "I don't think he will," I said. The truth was, I had no idea how he would react. Howard was worried, it was plain to see. He nodded, put on the night vision gear, and waited. I jogged over to my Ford Ranger, which was nestled among the abandoned cars. I turned my headlights on, and Howard immediately turned his off. He drove off, traveling west on Thompson Lane. They were going to take another route back to the farm while I caught up with them and maintained a 50-yard gap. We arrived at the intersection a few minutes later. I sat in my truck and waited. The captain and Andy walked up a moment later. He looked at the truck and scowled. "Where the hell is the tanker and your friends?" he demanded. "They left." "Why? I didn't authorize this." The tone of his voice indicated his temper was rising. I shrugged. "They had other things to do." "Why is it so important, Captain? We pulled off a successful mission. You now have almost 500 gallons of gas. I had hoped you would be pleased." "Get out of the damn truck," he snarled and reached for the door handle. It was locked. "Not a good idea," I said. He paused. "And why not?" "Because when I get out of the truck, it is the signal for my friends to open fire. I took the precaution to have a couple of snipers set up in case you acted the way you're acting right now." His eyes arched in understanding. He started to reach for his sidearm. "I strongly recommend you keep your hand away from your sidearm, Captain," I said somberly. He stopped and glared at me. "Captain, I believe it's time for you and me to have a little heart-to-heart. We are not your minions. I would like for us to continue to work together for a common goal, but your behavior right now is giving me second thoughts," I said. He leaned forward slightly. "You don't think I can kill you before your friends can get a shot off?" he growled. I nodded slightly. "You could, but then we'd both be dead. What good is that?" "I'd rather us part on friendly terms, but you seem to have a lopsided perspective of our relationship. Let me edify you. You do not order us around. We do not kowtow to you. If you want 1,000th man, Captain, you must be one in return. I promised you fuel and we delivered. We don't owe you anything else." The captain glared at me a moment longer. He pointed one of his meaty fingers at me a moment and stomped off. He was met at the bus by two of his men, and it appeared they had a quiet but heated discussion. Andy lingered beside my truck. "He's pissed. Boy, is he pissed," she said under her breath. "Yeah, I suppose." "He'll get over it." Andy stifled a chuckle. "Are you and I going to be enemies now?" I asked. She bit her lip as if coming to a decision. "Do you know where College Grove is?" she asked. "Yeah. Henry Horton Highway runs right through the middle of it, right?" She nodded. "At the fork, where Horton Highway splits with Shelbyville Highway, there's a store. We cleared it of zombies a couple of weeks ago. It's abandoned now, and I don't think anybody goes around there. Would you meet me there in 2 days? At sunup, maybe? By yourself?" I looked at her a long moment. "Okay, if I can." She nodded and started to say something else. The captain yelled for her. She looked at me a moment longer and then ran back to the bus. I waited for them to drive away and then waited 10 minutes more. When I was satisfied, I flashed my headlights. Julie emerged a few seconds later with her AR-15. She ran to me and got into the truck. "It looked like it was going to go bad for a minute. How'd it go?" she asked. I filled her in as we drove home. Chapter 4. The Journal. This is the journal of Harold Boom Boom Walsh. I was at one time an aspiring medical student. However, due to unforeseen misfortunes, I had to drop out of college and found myself installed in the occupation of a deputy sheriff when the worldwide outbreak struck the city of Nashville in inexorable force. I watched in helplessness and fear as the inmates became infected. Oddly, 3 of us seemed to be immune. 2 of us had tower duty, locked away from the rest when they started turning on each other. Other deputies fled for their lives and abandoned us. We managed to separate ourselves from the infected and were thus safe. Safe being a subjective state of mind. In summation, Sherry, my other co-worker, and I found ourselves with over 100 infected inmates. They were confined in their cells, of course, so we were relatively safe. There were so many of the infected roaming the streets of downtown Nashville, we did not dare go outside. We tried several times, but quickly turned back lest we succumb to a most unpleasant death. We had taken inventory of the food wares and found we had enough to feed us for several months. The water was still running and we had generators, so instead of seeking escape, we elected to lock ourselves in the jail. It was safer. I have started this journal on the 2nd week of our self-imposed quarantine. The infected inmates have not eaten food nor drank any fluids during this entire time. It is at this time when our experiments started. Almost all of the inmates are infected. We have one inmate who appears healthy, however he is an intemperate sort. When I tried to check on him, he responded by throwing feces on me. I used a broom handle to slide his tray of food to him. He thanks me by throwing shit at me. The noises these things make, combined with the putrid odor, are enough to drive one mad. I hated it, but every time we attempted to go outside, the streets were roaming with those things. There were far too many. We were effectively trapped. Sherry and I broke open the evidence locker last night and found some marijuana. I think the weed, in combination with all of the moaning and shrieking, were the seeds for our idea. We had no idea why some people became infected and why others did not. There were many unanswered questions. Sherry thought of it first. I think there is an evil streak in her. She suggested we conduct experiments on the infected. She thought it would be amusing and a fun way to pass the time. I reluctantly agreed, but only because I thought it might help me understand this infection better. We started with sensory experiments. We would make noises at various ranges and at various distances. We would blink a flashlight on and off. We would use various things to induce motion stimuli. We tried to maintain scientific standards, but to be honest, we were lax. In summation, the infected inmates seemed to maintain most of their senses. Their sight, smell, and hearing seemed to remain intact with only a small amount of degradation. I've no idea about their sense of taste. The sensory experiments segued into other tests. We intentionally withheld food and water from them. It did not matter. 3 weeks later and they were still alive. When we would slide a tray of food or a cup of water through the slot, the infected inmates would ignore it and try to grab at us. The second experiment was also initiated by Sherry. I had found the key to the armory and we had armed ourselves. Sherry had a Glock 40 caliber which she decided to experiment with. One of the infected inmates was a large muscular gangbanger in his 20s. Sherry began the experiment by aiming her weapon through the food slot and shooting him in the shins. He seemed oblivious to the pain and had repeatedly tried to attack us by slamming against the cell door. She giggled like a schoolgirl as she worked her way up his torso. The test subject finally collapsed when Sherry shot him between the eyes. We left him lying in the cell. He didn't move for several hours. We finally got up the nerve to open the cell door and check on him. We confirmed his status. He was deceased. Our first experiment yielded the following conclusion. A headshot was the fastest method for killing one of these things. I found myself nodding and closed the notebook. I was intrigued, but I was also very tired. Julie had pulled a pillow over her head to block out the soft glow of the candle I had on the nightstand. I blew it out and snuggled up beside her. She let out a brief moan and wiggled her butt up against me. I silently thanked God for bringing the 2 of us together and drifted off to sleep. I probably slept 4 hours before awaking during a dream about the journal. I guess my desire to read it had crept into my nocturnal rest and wouldn't go away. I carefully got out of bed, put a pair of jeans on, and went into the den. It was nearing the end of July, and it had been a hot summer. We only ran the air conditioner sparingly, so the house was warm and humid. I opened a couple of windows to let some of the cool morning air inside, lit a couple of candles, settled in Rick's old chair, and opened the journal to the page I had dog-eared last night. Our next experiment of sorts was an attempt to get 2 infected inmates to attack each other. Sherry and I donned riot gear, armed ourselves with taser shields, and entered a cell. Upon reflection, it was an ill-conceived idea, but an accidental experiment was performed. The taser shields had no effect on them. We were successful in getting one of them handcuffed and leg shackled, but it was only through sheer overpowering of the test subject and not the stunning effect of the taser shock. Sherry pricked her finger and put a few drops of blood on it. The subject is a male, but it seems malapropos to assign gender to these things now. And then, we shoved him into another inmate's smell. The unhindered inmate did in fact attack the subject with Sherry's blood on him, but the attack only lasted a few seconds. He aggressively bit our handcuffed subject, and then seemed to lose interest. Handcuffed subject was not aggressive to the other infected inmate, only toward us. Next experiment, attempts to stimulate pain. In summation, we tried many things in an attempt to cause pain to the subject. None appeared to have worked. Or if they did work, the test subjects showed no physical reaction to the pain stimuli. I will spare the details and, for purposes of brevity, simply list the tests. Burning, we started with boiling water and escalated to a propane torch. Cutting, we started with slight cuts, deeper cuts, disemboweling, and dismemberment. Poisoning, the first phase was forcing drain cleaner down the throat of the test subject, and then we ejected the same subject in its arm. You could clearly see the caustic effects of the lye burning through the skin. No reaction to the obvious pain was noted. We attempted some other more intense pain stimuli. None of them produced a physical reaction. Hypothesis: whatever infection this is, it kills or neutralizes the section of the brain which reacts to pain. When our imagination of pain stimuli was exhausted, we moved on to other experiments. We attempted to drown a subject and locked one subject in a freezer with a supply of dry ice. Both subjects were rendered inert within comparably the same amount of time a live human would. We thought they were dead, but when they were exposed to air, they returned to consciousness within minutes. The test subject we put into the freezer was also frozen stiff. Within an hour at regular room temperature, the subject had thawed out to the point where it was at least partially ambulatory. It is at this point where we decided on another experiment. We used the frozen test subject. While it was still moving slowly, we strapped him down on a table. Once it was completely secured, we cut his skull cap off. Holy shit, I thought. Boom Boom and his sidekick Sherry were serious about their experiments. I took a break and went into the kitchen. I found a dark roast blend someone had already ground up. During one of our forays, we had happened upon a Starbucks cafe relatively untouched by looting or vandalism. We procured several bags of their products in various blends. It was a wonderful find. I had a coffee percolator rigged to a battery. I got it going, poured myself a good-sized mug, and walked back into the den. Macy had woken up. She made her way to the den and sat awkwardly on the couch. She was wearing a bathrobe, and with her large baby bulge, she was finding it difficult to keep the robe completely closed down below. I pretended not to notice. She still had lines on her face where she had been sleeping, but her hair was freshly brushed. Although her face was a bit puffier now from the weight gain, I grudgingly admitted to myself she was a very beautiful mom-to-be. The baby has been kicking for the last couple of hours. I've given up on sleep. What are you doing? She asked. Just a little reading while it's quiet. I looked down at my mug. Here, I'll fix myself another. I handed it to her and retrieved a fresh mug. Thank you, she said quietly when I walked back into the den. I sat back in the chair and pointedly ignored her. I had been to an autopsy once, back when I was in school. I remembered watching in fascination as the technician cut the scalp and then peeled it back over the face. She then used a small power saw to cut through the skull. I vividly recalled the distinct popping noise when the skull cap was pried off. I tried to repeat the process I had seen, although my tools were limited to a locked blade knife and a Dremel saw. Although my technique was quite sloppy, I was successful in removing the skull cap without damaging the brain. The test subject remained alive, during this process. What we observed was startling. The brain itself was the color of obsidian, and it smelled like nothing I have ever experienced before. The spidery veins in the brain tissue were literally undulating, pulsating. I quickly backed away and put on my gas mask. Sherry laughed at me scornfully. "Zach?" I stopped reading and looked up to see Macy looking at me. She had managed to fold her legs in a ladylike fashion, which was good. The last thing I needed was Julie walking in while I was staring at my ex-girlfriend's crotch. "I know you hate me, but I wanted you to know how appreciative I am of living here with you two." She was speaking quietly. "I don't hate you," I replied in the same quiet tone. I had good reason to hate her, though, with every ounce of my being. I was hopelessly in love with her once. Not too long ago, or maybe a lifetime ago, she had dumped me. To top it off, her new boyfriend and his buddies gave me a harsh beating. My house was vandalized, my Facebook page was filled with cruel comments, and she had some critical remarks of her own to say about me. It was not a good moment in my life. Then the crazy pandemic set in. Society collapsed and our lives were turned upside down. Months later, we had a confrontation with some unpleasant individuals, and I had been shot. Fred and Julie were rushing me home when they happened upon Macy. She was alone, pregnant, and walking aimlessly down the road with nothing more than a suitcase for company. They took her in. If I had been the one driving, I doubted I would have stopped. She was still looking at me. I sighed. "You hurt me badly, but I don't hate you." She started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I believe I know what you're thinking. You're thinking we should talk this out, resolve our differences, forgive and move forward, all of that daytime television bullshit. Don't bother. I'm not interested." I started to resume my ignoring of her, but decided to say something else. "Why haven't you ever asked me how Jason died?" I asked. She looked at me stoically. "Julie told me what happened. I understand why you did it." I started to shake my head. Julie had not witnessed it. All she knew about it was what I had told her, and I had glossed over a few of the details. I opted not to go into it. Julie and you have become friends. I'm happy for that. One day, perhaps you'll catch me looking at you and I'll smile. I can't say it will ever happen, though, and I would appreciate it if you didn't try to force the issue. Macy looked at me a long moment before she spoke. "I understand, Zach." She pushed herself off of the couch and stood. "I think I'll get breakfast started." She started to say something else, decided against it, and walked into the kitchen. She returned a moment later and refilled my coffee mug. It was a nice gesture, but I needed some space, so I stepped outside. It was getting light out now. I sat in one of the rocking chairs and continued reading. We poked and prodded at various parts of the brain. We would be rewarded with the test subject displaying various muscle spasms or tics. The test subject would moan in a queer way, but never spoke or screamed. I must admit we should not have smoked any weed before conducting this particular experiment, but we did. We got a little carried away with the poking and prodding. At one point, we accidentally lacerated a section of the brain. A strange black-colored goo started oozing out. This seemed to amuse Sherry. She giggled as she made additional lacerations. The test subject died approximately 15 minutes later. I hung one of them by the neck. I left it hanging for 3 days. It would sense us when we were near, and its face would contort in primal anger. Question mark? I hung another one by his feet. Same results, although the subject's face turned a dark color as a result of the strange fluids settling. 2 days after dissecting the test subject's brain, I awakened to the sound of gunfire. Sherry had started shooting all of the infected inmates and even shot Dante, the uninfected inmate. I watched from the control room. I did not try to intervene. She had a strange look on her face, and, to be honest, I was concerned she might try to shoot me as well. When she killed the last one, she looked up at me as I watched her through the thick glass. The expression on her face was frightening. It was not the Sherry I knew. I sat in the control room the rest of the day contemplating what to do. Occasionally, I looked out at Sherry. She stood in the middle of the day room, unmoving. It is dusk now. I've decided to make a run for it after sunset. Quite frankly, I'm frightened. There's something about Sherry that is not quite right. I think she may have become infected, or perhaps the strain of the situation has driven her mad. All I know is I've got to get out of this place and away from her before I'm killed or worse. I've loaded up a knapsack with as much food and water as I can, along with some ammunition for my Glock. My plan is to sneak by her, exit the jail, and take my chances on the street. My destination is my mother's house. She lives, or I should say lived, I had no delusions, I knew she was dead, in the 5 Points neighborhood. At a slow jog, I can get there in less than 30 minutes. The journal abruptly ended. I closed the spiral notebook and sat contemplating what I had read. There was some insightful information. Had Sherry become infected? She was certainly acting differently from the other zombies. Perhaps Boom Boom was right. She had simply gone insane. I looked up when I heard the door open. "What are you reading?" Julie asked. She had sat in the chair next to me and was looking at the spiral notebook. "It was in the knapsack we found lying in the road," I said. "It looks like a diary or journal written by a jailer." "What does it say?" she asked. I shrugged. "I've only read a couple of paragraphs. Seems like he and another jailer intentionally hid out in the jail when the outbreak was at its peak." I set the notebook down. The experiments intrigued me, and I was going to reread the journal when I had the opportunity. I changed the subject. "How are your equestrian skills coming along?" Fred had recently started teaching Julie how to ride a horse. She smiled. "I'm having a lot of fun. Prancer can be a bit mischievous, though. If I'm not careful, she'll try to eat my hair, and yesterday the little stinker snuck up behind me while I was bent over picking something up. She pushed me over and then took off running when I scolded her." She laughed. "She's a handful. I don't know what got in Fred's head, though. One day he up and says I need to learn how to ride. He's thinking of the future." It wasn't a lie, exactly. Fuel has a limited shelf life. It'll be a matter of time before we'll be like the Amish, depending on horses for transportation and working the fields. "And Fred wants you to take care of Prancer after he leaves," I thought silently. "What about biofuel?" she asked. "Can't cars run on biofuel?" "Yeah, diesel engines can. There are several restaurants around with grease pits. I'll need to work on a plan. But Fred's right. We need to round up some horses." It was a lot to think about. I started the generator, went inside, and stuck my head in the kitchen. "Fred will be joining us this morning. I think Bernie may even come by. But Fred is the guest of honor today. Could I ask you to cook him a steak?" Macy looked at me. "Sure. Do you want one too?" I shook my head and headed off to the bathroom to clean up. The water would still be cold, but I was used to it. I washed up quickly and dressed. Julie walked in the bathroom as I was drying off. "Aw, I wanted to take a shower with you," she said. I smiled and kissed her. "Maybe next time. Go ahead and jump in, and I'll tell Macy to get in after you. Today's an important day." Julie was still groggy, but her eyes came open at my statement. "What's going on, Zach?" she asked. "I'll explain later. I've got to open up the bridge," I said, kissed her again, and hurried outside before she could question me further. Fred and Bernie showed up about the time I made it to the bridge. We had located a Volvo truck dealership a few days ago and picked one out. It was a black model VNL 630, which I understood to be their middle-of-the-line model. We had done some modifications, including a quasi-cattle catcher Howard had fashioned on the front bumper with some scrap steel. It was designed to push cars and zombies out of the way. We had also loaded it up with anything we could think of. It looked like Fred was ready. "Good morning, Mr. Gunderson," Bernie said in his peculiar high-pitched voice as he exited the truck. Fred got out and nodded at me. "Good morning, Bernie." "Fred," I said as I looked at Fred. "All set?" He nodded again. Bernie brought his bike along. He said he was going to do some riding around. We went inside to a prepared table. Due to Bernie's oddities, we had been reluctant for him to be around Julie and Macy. We thought he would be the proverbial dirty old man and would be trying to steal their panties when nobody was looking. However, Bernie was always a gentleman around the girls, and in fact was downright bashful. Fred led us in prayer before we started eating. The conversation was casual while we ate. I caught Julie looking at me pointedly. She knew something was going on. I waited until we were through eating before I spoke. "Girls, there's something Fred and I need to tell you." Macy and Julie looked at me expectantly. I was about to speak when Fred cleared his throat. "Girls, I'm going to be leaving for a spell." It took a couple of seconds before it sunk in. Julie dropped her fork. Macy's jaw dropped and she covered her mouth with her hand. "Why are you leaving, Fred? Where are you going?" Macy asked. "I want you two girls to know I have grown quite fond of the both of you. You've been like surrogate daughters to me. Unfortunately, it is a reminder to me I have a daughter somewhere out there. I'm going to find her, and if I do, I'm going to bring her home." "But she's somewhere in Los Angeles," Julie lamented. "You've no idea where to find her." Julie was practically shouting now. "You're right, Julie," Fred answered quietly. "Beyond knowing she is in Los Angeles, I've not a clue where to look. All I have is the address of her apartment. Nevertheless, I must try." Bernie hastened a quick glance around the table and dropped his head and focused on his breakfast. Macy looked over at me. "Zach, how far is Los Angeles from here?" "Approximately 2,000 miles, I replied. The two of them were stunned at the answer. It was as if they never knew this tidbit of information before. However, it was understandable. I've prepared a travel plan for Fred. Hang on. I retrieved a notebook from the den and brought it back to the kitchen table. Fred knew I had been working on it, but had not seen it. He leaned forward. I had a hand-drawn map on the first page with bookmarks and checkpoints along the route. I named the checkpoints after the phonetic alphabet. If you're able to contact us by radio, we can monitor your progress. Or lack thereof, I thought. I looked at the girls. The reason for the code is for security. We don't want someone listening in and determining where Fred is located. I gestured at the map again. This is the main route of travel. I looked over at Fred. I put an atlas in your truck and marked it with checkpoints. I expect you will encounter possible choke points along the way. The first major obstacle will possibly be the bridge over the Mississippi. It could be clogged with abandoned cars, trucks, you name it. I looked around the table. I've played around with the variables, and I believe Fred will be capable of averaging 200 miles a day. This will mean Fred will make it to LA in 10 days, and then 10 days to make it back. Possibly quicker because you'll now be familiar with the route and obstacles. I've given you a timeline of 30 days to search for your daughter. This is a minimum of 50 days. I've rounded it up to 60 days. I pointed toward where the semi-truck was parked outside. We've worked hard on the truck getting it prepared, I said, which was an understatement. The doors were stuffed with surplus Kevlar vests we had found at the police academy. There were dozens of them. They were old, which led us to believe they were used for training purposes. We had no idea if they were even effective anymore, but sometimes one must work with what you have. We had also salvaged some bulletproof glass from the teller's booths at a local bank. We had to jerry-rig brackets to hold them in place over the regular glass, but it would provide some amount of safety for him, although it didn't seem like it was going to be very feasible. We also created shooting ports for Fred in case he encountered hostiles. I outlined these upgrades. We also installed a ham radio so we'll be able to communicate. At least, from time to time. There were bound to be dead spots. Julie was crying freely now. Suddenly, she jumped up and ran out of the room. The front door slammed a second later. I started to get up, but Fred stopped me. I met his eyes and understood. He needed to talk to her. I sat back down and watched him as he quietly walked out. Bernie cleared his throat. "Miss Julie needs to add some honey in her coffee. It'll calm her nerves." "Not now, Bernie," I said. "Just saying," he muttered under his breath. Fred found Julie sitting on top of Rick's Hill. It was an old Indian mound, but since Zach had buried Rick there, they had informally named it Rick's Hill. Fred worked his way up and sat beside Julie. "The not knowing has been eating at my soul, Julie. My only blood. The last living McCoy is out there somewhere. I can't sleep, and when I do, I have nightmares. My little girl is in danger, and I'm not there for her." Fred sighed heavily. "I'm probably already too late, but I have to try." "But we need you," Julie said weakly. Fred put his arm around her shoulders. "And I need you all. I have confidence you all will be okay. The young man you are in love with is quite capable, in case you didn't already know it. I'll only be gone a couple of months. Y'all will be fine." Julie sobbed for a couple of minutes. "I know I'm being selfish." Fred squeezed her tightly. "Will you be okay?" she finally asked. "I'll be fine, baby girl," he said. In truth, Fred was scared. Fred squeezed her again. I need you to be strong for me." After a minute, she looked up at Fred. "Okay," she finally said. I stood in the yard and watched the two of them start walking back from Rick's Hill. I hoped he had calmed her fears. I did not want him to leave either. We had grown very dependent on him. He was quiet-natured, stoic, a calming force during turbulent times. When he told me what he had in mind, I told him he was condemning himself to a certain death. He asked me what I would do if I were in his situation. I couldn't answer. Instead, I got a fresh notepad and we started planning. Now, here we were. I heard the door open. Macy and Bernie walked outside. "Is everything okay?" Macy asked. "It will be. We're going to have to adjust without him being here," I said. "Do you think he'll be able to find her?" she asked. "It seems like an impossible feat, but if anyone can do it, Fred can," I said. Bert grunted in agreement. "A most impressive man, Fred McCoy is. Most impressive," he said. He glanced at Macy and then averted his gaze. "I stored a large jug of honey in his truck. It'll help. Honey prevents dropsy, you know." Macy stifled a chuckle. I looked at her and almost smiled, but stopped myself. We waited for them as they made their way back to the front yard. Fred looked at all of us and gave a reassuring smile. "I guess it's time for me to start off on this journey," he said. Bernie grunted in agreement. Julie and Macy nodded with tears streaming down their pretty faces. I was feeling a little emotional as well. I held back the tears and shook his hand instead. Bernie did as well. Fred hugged the girls and walked over to his truck. He opened the door and looked back. "I would be most appreciative if all of you would look after Prancer. She's never been alone before, and she might get a little apprehensive." "I promise I'll take care of her," Julie responded. Fred looked at us and nodded. I thought I detected a bit of sadness in his eyes. Bernie untied his bicycle off of the back of the truck and moved out of the way. Without further ado, Fred got into his semi, started it up, and drove away. The exhaust noise of the large diesel engine concerned me. It was loud and was bound to draw unwanted attention, but there was nothing we could do about it. We all stood together, waving at Fred as he drove out of sight. The ensuing silence was heavy, awkward. I think we collectively missed Fred before he was even out of sight. "I believe I'll ride around and see a bit of the countryside on this end of the county," Bernie said quietly. "That's how I met Fred, you know. He's a fine man." He hopped on his bike and pedaled away. Chapter 5. Fred's journey begins. With no small amount of trepidation, Fred got into his brand new and highly modified Volvo truck, waved to his friends, and headed out. He caught one last glimpse of them in the driver's side rearview mirror before they disappeared from sight, and wondered if it would be the last time he ever saw them. Surprisingly, Fred encountered very few obstacles other than numerous potholes as he made his way to Harding Place. When he got to Bellevue, a once thriving section of West Nashville, comprising a rich mixture of commercial enterprise and residential neighborhoods, there was a substantial increase in the number of corpses. They were everywhere, hundreds of them. No, there were thousands of them. They were strewn in the roadways, in the front yards of houses, sitting immobile in abandoned cars. They were in the advanced stages of decomposition now. Even so, the stench was still nauseating. Zack would be hard-pressed to fulfill rule number 8, burn the corpses, Fred thought with a wry smile. The big tires of the Volvo squashed a rat as he continued west on Highway 70 and made his way toward the city of Dixon. It was at the intersection of Sawyer Brown Road when he spotted a group of zombies. There were approximately 20 of them standing in the road. They had massed together, as they seemed to do, and were already working their way toward him. Fred decided this would be a good test for the cattle catcher Howard had mounted on the front of the truck. He slowed to 5 miles per hour and barreled through them. It worked as intended. All of them were pushed to either side of the truck. None was caught under the tires or undercarriage. Several miles seemed to have gone by quickly. It wasn't until he got to the city of Waverly when he encountered another human. "Mr. Truck Driver, do you have your ears on?" It was a voice on the CB radio. It was a deep baritone, as if it was emanating from the diaphragm of a very large man. The strong southern twang left no doubt this man was a country boy. Fred looked at the radio in surprise for a moment, and then hurriedly grabbed the microphone. I am, and hello, Fred replied. What's your handle? The name's Fred. Fred McCoy. They call me Big Country, Mr. McCoy, and I am pleased to talk to you. But I have to ask, what are you doing in our neck of the woods? Big Country asked. I'm passing through, sir, on my way to find my daughter. Fred explained about his dilemma with his missing daughter and using side roads in order to avoid the massive traffic jams on the interstates. Yes, sir, Interstate 40 is clear here and there for a few miles, and then you have major roadblocks. Mr. McCoy, would you like to park a spell and socialize with us? We don't have a lot, but we can feed you. I'm much obliged, sir, but I believe I'll wait and catch you on the flip side. I understand, Mr. McCoy. Have you encountered any other survivors? I have. Fred told Big Country about Zach. If you're ever in the South Nashville or Franklin area, give him a shout on the CB. If he's around, he'll answer. Tell him you know me and he'll take care of you. Fred also gave him the ham radio frequency they monitored. I appreciate that, Mr. McCoy. You're gonna be good until you get to Huntington. When you get there, you're going to encounter a roadblock. You tell those fine folks you and I are friends, and you'll be just fine. Chapter 6. An Appointment with Andy. After dinner, the three of us spent the rest of the evening preparing and canning vegetables. The summer had been relatively mild with lots of rainfall. The result was a bountiful crop. What time do you meet the dike? Julie asked. Macy giggled. I frowned at the both of them. Sunrise. Are you going to take her a present? Macy asked teasingly. Julie laughed this time. They ganged up on me frequently these days. Yeah, go ahead and yuck it up, I said. We finished canning at around 9 and went to bed. I was snuggled up against Julie. I was comfortable, tired and about to doze off, but she decided this would be a good time to talk. She turned around and started kissing me. Zach, she said. Yes, sweetheart, I mumbled. Let's talk about Macy. I opened my eyes now and looked at her. You want to talk about Macy right now? I asked. She thinks you're going to kick her out after she gives birth, she said. Are you? In fact, I remember suggesting it not too long ago. Wasn't that the plan? She started rubbing my chest. She knew how much I liked it when she did that. She has nowhere to go, she said. I smiled in the dark. You want her to stay here? I phrased it as a question, but I already knew the answer. Don't you? She's been really helpful, and I've seen how you act around her. You're nice to her. You're a little aloof toward her sometimes, but you're nice to her. You don't mind her being here, and you know it. She stroked my chest some more. She's going to need help raising her kid, too. Don't you want to be a surrogate daddy? I snorted. With Jason's kid? I'd rather not. Now she sat up, causing the blanket to fall, exposing her breasts. I always stared at them. They seemed to have a hypnotic spell on me. It's not the kid's fault, Zach. Besides, what if it's your baby? My eyes widened and my jaw probably dropped. I lost all interest in her breasts, which I thought would never happen. Julie put her hands on my shoulders. Do the math, Zach. You two hooked up in late November, right? Perhaps about 9 months ago? I was shocked to the point where my brain was going into vapor lock. I had to count on my fingers and then counted twice more. What does Macy say? Does she know? She doesn't know. She's scared to death of how you may react, Julie said. Julie lay back beside me and put her head on my shoulder, which caused her breasts to be pressed up against me. Okay, I liked her breasts against me even better than my chest being rubbed. Do you want her to stay? I asked. I felt her head nod. Okay. Julie sat up again. You mean it? I nodded again. Julie responded with another kiss. You won't regret it, Zach. Fate has thrown all of us together, you know? We're a family now. She snuggled closer now, kissed me harder, and put a leg over my waist. As tired as I was, I could not resist her wiles. When I finally did go to sleep, I was out like a light. College Grove was a sleepy little community in between Eagleville and Nolansville. It grew up in a fork in the road and eventually became the intersection of two state highways. I sat in the parking lot of the old country store watching the sun come up. There were approximately a dozen corpses on both sides of the road. I drove close to a few of them and saw distinctive bullet holes in the head. None of them had been burned, though. The putrid stench had all but abated. I got out, stretched, and waited. Someone had spray-painted WE on the front of the store. I peeked inside, and as expected, the store had been completely looted. Andy drove up as I poured a cup of steaming coffee out of my thermos. She parked a few feet away, looked around everywhere, and then stared at me. She was driving a Jeep Wrangler with a few modifications. There was a rack of large lights mounted on top, a winch mounted on the front, and everything had been spray-painted flat black. There were the same letters stenciled on the doors. I saw a couple of radio antennas as well. I waved. She got out and tentatively walked toward me. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked as she walked up. She was wearing the same clothing she had on a couple of days ago. Camouflage pants, boots, black tank top, and no bra. Her breasts were small, but the taut fabric left little to the imagination. At least her face was freshly scrubbed and without those stupid-looking black streaks under her eyes. Her hair was a little longer now. I kept from staring at her pert breasts as I held up my thermos. "Sure." I refilled my cup and poured a second. She nodded in thanks and was quiet as she blew into her cup and took small sips. I motioned toward the graffiti. WE. What does that stand for? Do you know? Ward's Empire. It's the name of our group. The captain ordered us to start marking our territory, she said. It's his last name. Ward. Charles Ward. I used to call him Uncle Charlie, but nobody dares call him by his name anymore. I grunted. Any opinion I had of them claiming territory I kept to myself. I changed the subject and pointed toward the back of my truck. We got lucky with our gardens this summer, and brought a basket of assorted vegetables and a few watermelons. I hope you brought some stuff as well. She smirked at me. Yeah, I figured you'd want something in trade. I brought some reloading equipment and some weed. Do you get high? I shook my head. I don't get high, but I can always use reloading equipment. Fred believes marijuana would possibly be a good trading commodity. How's that working out for your group? Andy set her cup down on the hood of my truck, fished a joint out of her cargo pocket and lit it up. She inhaled deeply and offered it to me. I shook my head again. It got a laugh out of her. You're such a square, she said, and took another long toke. I shrugged my shoulders. Yeah, I guess so. Come on, I'll show you the vegetables. We walked to the back of the truck and I pulled the tarp off. She picked up a plump tomato and sniffed it. She then aimed for the front door of the store, threw it, and giggled in glee when the tomato splattered all over the door's new markings. I laughed at her antics and walked over to her Jeep. She had 2 large plastic bags full of cartridge casings and primers. It's all in .22 caliber. I saw the way you were shooting that pistol the other night, so I took this out of the armory. You like? Oh yeah, I like, I said. Will the captain miss this stuff? Yeah, probably. She inhaled and held it in as long as she could before exhaling. Wait, does he not know you're here meeting with me? I asked. She shook her head. It'll be our little secret. She grinned and took another toke before continuing. We've not traded with anyone. When we've encountered survivors, they're scared shitless of us. They give us what we want or they run and hide. The captain said you're the only one who has stood his ground. I think he actually admires you. She smoked some more and smirked. He was pissed the other night when you guys didn't meet up with him. He thought it was disrespectful. Was he going to rip us off? I asked. Andy shrugged and chuckled. Probably. Is he the one who gave you the black eye? She looked at me sharply. You're full of questions, aren't you? I bet you want me to tell you everything about us. She looked at me for a moment. I said nothing as she took another toke. Yeah, he's the one who hit me. She finished up her joint and tossed the roach on the ground. She walked closer to me until her body was pressed against mine, and then she put her hands on my waist. So, you want to fuck? She was looking at me coyly now, with a hint of a smile. I was taken aback, but I recovered quickly. I don't think my girlfriend would understand. Besides, I'm betting a good-looking girl like you already has a boyfriend. Which one is he? One of the dudes on the bus, maybe? The smile left her face, and she turned away. I don't have a boyfriend. She was quiet now. Damn, I thought. I sure do have a way of saying the wrong things sometimes. I tried to repair the damage. I fought for the right words. If I've hit a sore spot, I apologize. She leaned up against the truck and didn't say anything for a few minutes. I figured it was about time to leave when she spoke again. There are 15 of us. When the outbreak hit, there were more, but some of the group became infected. The captain killed them, which left us with 12 men and 3 women. There were 6 women at one time, but 1 escaped and 2 killed themselves. The men take turns with the women, except me. The captain saves me for himself. I started. Wait, I thought he was your uncle. She nodded while looking at something on the ground. By blood or marriage? He's my mother's brother, she replied. It's okay, really. If not him, it'd have to be with someone else. Hell, he might have even made me one of the camp whores. I didn't know what to say. The captain was somewhere in his 40s. Andy was maybe 15 or 16. So, he didn't mind having incestuous relations, and he didn't mind using women as sex slaves. His vision of a new world order was sounding less and less pristine. I didn't reply. Instead, I leaned up against the truck beside her and decided to change the subject. Why does everyone call him the captain? Was he a soldier or something? I asked. Andy scoffed. He was a captain at the Rutherford County Workhouse. He's never been a soldier. There's one dude in our group who was a Marine. Andy saw me frowning and laughed. Don't underestimate the captain, though. He's ruthless. Oh, I've no doubt. I gestured with a hand. Why'd he hit you? Andy fished another joint out of her cargo pocket. Because that's what he does, she said as she lit it. She took a couple of puffs and then inhaled before continuing. Maybe I looked at him wrong. I've stopped asking. Sometimes asking will get you another backhand or worse. I could see her eyes watering up. She turned away and dabbed at them quickly. I was going to ask her more, like if she thought her uncle was a nut job, but I held off. After all, she may still believe in him and was merely being a rebellious teenager when she wanted to meet with me. After a moment, she seemed to have regained her composure. So, tell me about your group. Are you the leader? She asked. We're a very small group, and we have no hierarchy of leadership. We work together in order to survive, and we have no interest in conquest. I motioned toward the back of my truck. We're attempting to set up trade networks with the survivors. Which reminds me, you said you guys have encountered other people. Can you tell me about them? She shrugged as she smoked her joint. Yeah, we've only seen a few people. You, the black family at the tire shop. There's a man with a couple of kids living in the house on Rocky Fort Road. He said his wife is dead, but the captain thinks she was hid out somewhere. We've been through some businesses in Eagleville. When we've gone back, it's obvious someone else has been there, but we don't know who. They've been doing a pretty good job of hiding from us. George, he's one of the Marines, is going to set up a patrol to catch them. What then? I asked. Andy shrugged her shoulders. I imagine the captain will make them an offer to either join us or pay taxes. If they refuse... She shrugged her shoulders again and then looked at me. They've been trying to find out where you live, too. I nodded in understanding. Fred and I had already figured as much. We talked some more about inconsequential issues, mostly about where we went to school and if we had any friends in common. We didn't. Andy noticed me looking at my watch. Do you have a date waiting? She asked. I looked up. What? Oh, no, I just have a lot of work to do back at the farm. Andy looked at me. I couldn't read her face. Can we meet again in a few days? She asked. Sure. How about a week from today? If either of us can't make it, we can call on the radio. She shook her head now. I don't want anyone knowing I'm meeting you. We ultimately agreed to coming here once a week at sunrise. If the other one doesn't show up within an hour, we try again next week. I helped her load up the basket of vegetables and turned to say goodbye to her. She grabbed me and kissed me. My real name is Andrea, she said, before she got into her Jeep and drove away. Chapter 7. A Near Ambush. Andy's kiss lingered in my thoughts as I drove, and I paid little attention to the intermittent abandoned automobiles left haphazardly in the roadway. I should have been focusing more on my situational awareness. I also made the mistake of going back the same way I came to College Grove. These transgressions led to what can be described in scientific terms as a royal screw-up. The only roads I've seen with cars piled up were on the interstate and some areas of the inner cities, like Nashville and Franklin. On this particular stretch of highway, there were cars here and there. Most were parked on the side of the road. Others were left wherever they ran out of gas. I had no trouble maneuvering around them. However, as I neared one particular group of automobiles, I realized there was something different now from a couple of hours ago. My mouth went dry when I realized what I was seeing. Some of the cars had been moved. Someone had pushed 4 or 5 cars together and used them to create a choke point. An ambush, I was sure of it. There was no way around it. Both sides of the roadway had fencing and there were cars wedged against them. The only way was right down the middle. I made a snap decision and floored the accelerator. About the time I entered the narrow gap between the cars, a dirty woman wearing a tattered dress of an indiscernible pattern stepped out in the roadway. It was hard to tell her age, but she definitely was not a zombie. I've no doubt whoever set this up assumed I would slam on my brakes and stop before hitting someone so pitiful-looking, especially a helpless-looking woman. Once I stopped, the ambush would be sprung. The only problem was I remembered at least 2 movies with this exact same scene. I never let off of the gas. Her facial expressions told the story. First, a tale of downtrodden woe designed to induce pity. It quickly changed to realization and then terror as I bore down on her. She was catapulted up in the air and knocked forward approximately 20 feet before landing on the asphalt. I ran over her body as I sped off and leaned down in my seat. A few shots rang out, and I heard a couple of distinct thuds from the impact of the bullets. Another thump and my rear window shattered. There was no doubt the woman was dead or dying. I was disgusted and angry with myself. When I was about 500 yards away, I slammed on my brakes and skidded sideways to a stop. It was time for long-range work. I grabbed my trusty Winchester and exited the truck. Macy's late boyfriend Jason had damaged the scope on it in an attempt to kill me. I killed him instead. Nevertheless, even though one of the reticles was cracked, I could still use it fairly effectively. I sighted in. There were 3 of them. One of them was crouched down beside the motionless body. The other 2 were merely standing there looking at me, guns in hand. No long-range rifles, though, only handguns. I shot the one on the left. He was the ugliest of the 3. He took the round squarely in the chest and went down as if someone had gut-punched him. The other 2 immediately began running and hid behind the cars. I waited and could have waited all day except for one thing. The putrid stench hit my nostrils before I saw or heard it. I turned around right as it lunged at me. He still had a little bit of his face left, but all I could really discern was it was a short, very fat male. His t-shirt might have been white once. Now it was heavily soiled and stretched to its maximum allowance due to his extremely swollen belly. I sidestepped quickly and came within a breath of being bitten. His hands were nothing more than bony nubs. The tissue was all but gone. I raised the rifle and butt-stroked it in the face. The zombie's lower jaw dislodged and he fell with a heavy thud. I guess you'd say I was extremely angry now. I stomped on his head until it cracked open. Black goo started oozing out and got on my boots. I looked around for any other zombies. Finding none, I put my scope back on my living adversaries. They were making quick peeks from behind one of the cars. I was breathing so heavily I could not aim. I kept looking and saw their car had an antenna. I thought, why not? I turned my CB radio to channel 19 and grabbed the microphone. Are you idiots listening? I looked back at them through the rifle scope. I watched as one of them crawled to the door and opened it. A guttural voice filled the radio speaker. "You're a dead man, you cocksucker," he snarled. I responded by putting a round through their radiator. He screamed more obscenities into his microphone. I put bullets in the other car facing me and shot out the tires of the other 2. Either he or his friend figured out the more he cursed me, the more I was going to shoot. He shut up and I reloaded before speaking again. "I got a good look at your faces. The next time I see you 2, I'm not gonna be so nice," I said. "You ran over my woman, you son of a bitch," one of them snarled. "That was your fault. You put her in that situation, so you suffer the consequences," I replied tersely. I got my breathing under control and made a decision. As much as I wanted to play with these 2 mutts, I had a multitude of farm chores to do. Besides, the sounds were going to draw more zombies. I fired one more round through the windshield of the car with the antenna and drove off. I made a point of running over the zombie as I left. His belly made the sound of a large water balloon bursting. I was mad, frustrated, and not a little disgusted with myself. I rationalized my actions. If I had stopped, I would have been relieved of all of my possessions and perhaps killed as well. Still, I had just killed a woman. It didn't seem right. I didn't care about the man. He deserved it. I put distance between us and was out of sight within seconds. Once I was sure I was not being followed, I switched to a sideband channel. "Come in, Saigon," I said. It was my code for Julie or Macy, indicating it was okay to respond. "I'm here," Macy responded. "Heading back," I said curtly. But then I realized I wasn't quite ready to go back. I needed time alone in order to decompress. "Check that. I'll be back in about 2 hours." "Okay, 10-4, she said. I drove aimlessly, trying to clear my head. I stuck to the back roads with no destination in mind. My brain almost did not register it. I drove by a house and happened to observe a swing set in the backyard. I backed up and pulled into the drive. I stared, looking at the swing set. Whoever had once lived here had kids. We had nothing for a kid other than a few cases of disposable diapers. I did my standard approach and entry. I started with driving right up to the front door of the house. After getting no reaction, I got out and knocked on the door. I left the rifle in the truck, but had my hand firmly attached to my holstered handgun. After a minute of silence, I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. I cleared the house without any surprises. There were 2 badly decomposed corpses in the master bedroom. It appeared as though they had killed themselves in the bed. The man still had a revolver gripped in his hand. I wrenched it free and then went back to the children's bedroom. Their kids were gone. I had no idea where they were. I found a picture of the family. They were a good-looking yuppie couple. Their kids looked to be around 2 and 3. I was hoping the family had not gotten rid of any baby stuff. A search found all of it stored neatly in a spare bedroom. I bet they were planning on having more kids one day. I loaded the truck with every baby item I could find. Other than a crib, I had no idea what was needed, so decided to let the girls sort through it all. I could always toss out the rest later. When the truck was filled, I walked around the house to see if there was anything else I could use. When I walked out the back door, I saw it then. 2 small graves in the backyard with simple wooden crosses. I marked the front door with the FEMA symbol. I briefly debated on burying the parents next to their children. Instead, I got in my truck and headed home.